Hi everyone, welcome to Kotlin London. Uh, well, I hope you had like a good summer, nice summer. Hopefully you had some break from work, and if you're back to the office or to a quasi-normal routine, or even if you're still working from home, we hope you enjoyed today's event. We'll do something different this month, and instead of the usual format where we have two technical talks, we are going to have a panel discussion about remote working. Why? Because we thought that code is really important part of a job, but it's not everything. And with the pandemic that disrupted our lives and everything around it, and even our work, I think it was important to talk about everything that's around coding, around our daily work, just to make us better developers. So my name is Enzo. I'll be your host today, and behind the scene we have Guillermo. Just some housekeeping first. So if you haven't already, please join our meetup page, hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and you can also follow us on Twitter at Kotlin London. And if you or someone you know might be interested in giving a talk, please let us know. We don't know when we're going to talk back to in-person events in London, but we want to keep the online community as much as possible and as thriving as possible. So if you're in London and you're interested in in-person events, just give me a shout. But if you are all around the world and you still want to give a talk, please let us know. We want to thank our sponsors, 47 Degrees, for sponsoring Kotlin London. Please check their training courses in Kotlin function and programming, and you can find a link in the description below. So today we got 4 panelists that will share their thoughts and their knowledge. I'll start the conversation, but feel free to post any question related to the topic, of course, in the YouTube chat. Just remember to put the hashtag ask. Why? Because everyone that participates will put in a draw to win 2 prizes. The winner can choose between an IntelliJ license or a yearly subscription at Moshi. Moshi is the #1 sleep and mindful app for kids. If you have kids that are struggling with bedtime routine or they're feeling anxious, especially in this timing, I highly recommend it. So make sure you join the conversation for entering the draw. I think that's it for now. We can just get started. So let's welcome our first panelist, which is our friend of a meetup, but also a meetup organizer as well. That is Garth Gilmore. Garth, nice to meet you.
Hi there.
Hi. So, just quick introduction, very quick about yourself, and one very quick question for you. It's just how the pandemic has affected you, and can you name some negative or positive from a personal perspective?
Sure, absolutely. So my name's Garth Gilmore. I'm the head of learning at Instill Software in Belfast. Instill is primarily a software development company, but we also do professional services. So we do training, consulting, coaching, all that kind of thing. And I manage that side of the business. So the positive for me would be that after 20 years of planes, trains and automobiles, I've actually stopped moving. So it's actually been a nice change of pace to be continuously working from home and not living out of hotels and so on. So that's in some ways been a positive for me. I think the negative would be that I am slowly approaching middle age, believe it or not, and I would have a lot of relatives who are in their 70s and 80s, and I just haven't been able to visit them. Some of them are in long-time residential care, some of them are far away, and I just shouldn't be traveling to visit them or shouldn't be seeing them, full stop. So that's been the saddest part of the whole thing, I think.
Nice. So second panelist from 47 Degrees, our sponsors. Thanks for joining us, Carmel Quinn. Hi, Carmel.
Hi.
Hi.
I'm people and culture.
Yeah. Go on.
I presume it's the same question, so I'll
yes, absolutely.
fire off really quickly. I'm the People and Culture Director for 47 Degrees. I've been with them for 6 months now. Prior to that, I was HR consulting, and I've sort of worked with lots of tech companies over the years as a HRD, really. So lots of experience, I suppose, behind me. Not quite middle-aged, quite probably heading towards the other side of it. But if I was to think about some of the things that the pandemic has given us, lots of opportunity to really think about the people perspective. It's, I really miss that people interaction. I miss sort of the going into an office and seeing people and being actually visible as a HR person. I suppose one of the advantages really has been being at home. Albeit I was kind of at home when I was consulting, but I think, my husband mightn't say that because we're both at home now quite a lot together. So maybe there's a downside to that too. But I think one of the things I've actually learned too is I've got better with technologies, and I think that's a real positive thing for me as well. So yeah, I'm quite a positive person. So I think on the good side of things rather than the negative side.
Yeah, I think that's definitely the pandemic has forced every one of us, even like the tech savvy like us, to learn new skills, definitely. Mm-hmm. So that's a positive for everyone. Yes,
definitely.
Cool. Our third panelist from Novoda, please welcome Edie Cockrell.
Hi everyone.
Same question for you.
Well, I mean, it's been a crazy kind of journey for me. I work at Novoda, who are quite an established remote-friendly company. And when I came in, it's a distributed team amongst lots of the world. I come from a traditionally office-based work, so I came in and I thought, this is very new and novel. And then the pandemic hit, and I went, okay, now everyone's doing it. Fantastic. So it's been a real positive to share my insight from Novoda, having an established consultancy, and all the tactics that have been using throughout the years to kind of help some of my colleagues in other companies going, how have you done this so far? Learning new technologies, amongst other things, has been the good positive thing. But as you said, there's something to be said about not seeing people in person. I think I'm looking forward to a future where we change how we do that and see if that's going to be a different thing, if that's going to be, yearly, annually, how that's going to look, or if it's people going back to the office. So yeah, exciting future, I think.
Nice. And the fourth, last but not least, of course, well, it doesn't need any introduction if you have ever done any Kotlin, because it's very known in our space. Please welcome Hadi Hariri. Hi, Hadi.
Hello. Hi.
Hi.
Thank you.
So if you want, just a brief introduction to you and as everyone else. One positive, one negative pandemic has affected you.
Yeah. I'm Hadi. I work at JetBrains. So in terms of the pandemic, how has it affected in a positive way? I set out a goal for myself that, similar to Garth, 20 odd years on the road. I decided that 2020 was the year I was going to drastically cut down travel. So it definitely made me keep my promises in that sense. And in regards to I think another positive aspect is, I think one of the previous panelists touched on is, having worked 21 years remote, it did open the eyes of other folks that have not been working remote and see the challenges and benefits, obviously, of remote work. On a negative aspect, I would also say that, in the context of our work, not being able to see your colleagues and not being able to go to the offices and not being able to meet friends that you usually, do during the year.
Nice. Yeah, I think it's pretty much for everyone. It's very struggle not to see the normal, the friends and the colleagues. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's start with like another quick round for everyone. It was just like in the terms of your company. So now that's after the first lockdown, we have like restriction begin to ease. Then we have most of of us as like a second lockdown, and now some countries like the UK is kind of back to no restrictions. Some other countries are still like in between. So how your company adapted to the attendance policy, how if there's like a mandatory days, and if you're still like still early days, but you can already summarize if things that went well or not went well, if you think that's like things are going to change anytime soon in terms of the company policy. It's up. I don't want to go like point the fingers at the start. So
I'll volunteer.
Okay.
I'll volunteer. So I think the situation in Northern Ireland has very much been, it's complicated, you know. So even some politicians I know, you know, don't entirely understand all the different rules and regulations that we have. So the situation has always been that, look, you only have to come back to the office whenever you feel ready and capable and up for it, and you're convinced it's safe, you know, and you can stay remote for as long as you want to. And that's been our policy since the beginning of the pandemic, and it will be our policy, as I understand it, for as long as the current situation lasts. And I don't think it's ever going to dramatically end, you know. I think it's going to be a very, very slow tail off, you know, but our policy is very simply that you don't have to come back until you want to come back, you know, full stop.
I mean, I agree. I think certainly for me, before I joined 47, I was consulting for small tech companies, and they were hired, you know, had big office spaces in London, really expensive. They really wanted to get their people back to work. So it was trying to think about, you know, all the health and safety, the risk assessments that you would need to do, getting people safely back to work, but also probably giving them some confidence to return, and some of that came last summer in the UK, when we had certainly in England and London, where we had a bit of a window of opportunity for trying to get people back into the office. But it was very much making sure that the office was really a safe place to come back to, that there was sort of almost like different working patterns, people could come in on different days, and only if they felt comfortable in coming back. Some of the CEOs were desperate to get them back in, you know, and were kind of forcing their hand a bit, but it was kind of trying to get them to rethink it, you know, and think about the health and safety risks first.
Edie, Hadi, any thoughts?
Well, I was going to say at the beginning, when kind of COVID was first, I think, starts happening, one of our favourite things to do at our morning stand-up was to ask everyone in detail, what's going in your country? What's happening? What lockdowns do you have? What's missing off the shelves in your country? So, I mean, in the terms of lightheartedness, at least there was that. Obviously, it did get a bit more serious towards the middle, but we definitely felt connected and open enough to have those kinds of conversations. And that was quite an interesting way to see from a personal perspective how each country was dealing with the pandemic and dealing with lockdowns. But as Garth said, I think it's true to say of most governments in most countries that they kind of don't know what's going on or how to put their own rules in place as well. So very much Navoda, when lockdown happened in London, and we have office in London, we all just worked from home. We kind of drew the line. We used that opportunity. The lease was coming up on our office anyway, so we just didn't renew it. We all worked from home, and it's only very recently that we've kind of looked into having an office again. Do we need one? What does that look like? Is that where we want to spend budget if people aren't going to want to come back to the office? And so, yeah, having some really deep discussions about that. So it's been really interesting.
Yeah, from our side, it's again also very up to the person when it's allowed to actually attend the office. So in some, because we've got offices in various countries, each with their own rules and regulations. So depending on the country, if it's permitted, then if folks want to go, they can, but we limit the number of people that can go and on certain days. And then we prioritize people because, we all love the whole working from home, but for some people it's difficult, right? Some people maybe live in a 2-bedroom apartment or 1-bedroom apartment, and they've got a small child, and it's difficult. So we prioritized folks that were struggling somewhat because of the way, how they were living, and allowed them to go first to the offices when possible.
Yeah, this is a good point. And let's start with another question I want to ask you. So definitely, it seems that remote working increased the employee burnout, was probably just like tied to everything else that's happening. So how do you deal with this stuff? And how are the psychological aspects look at on prolongating like a remote working? And how do you get it into your company policy? Probably it's more like for Carmel and Edie to answer first.
Yeah, I think burnout is something that's definitely happened and is happening. And I think from my experience, 47, they're very mindful in a way of this. And I think, if I looked at, we did a value survey shortly after I joined the organisation, and we'd had a good set of values, but it was really to see if they resonated with people working remotely and how people can, sort of kind of connect with each other. And what came out of that survey for us was a really good finding, was that we were hearing there was an awful lot of psychological safety, that people were trusted, they felt accountable, they felt able to get on and do their job. But it also gave us those channels that we could hear. We were asking quite pertinent questions in and around, how does that make you feel? What does that value sort of, how does that resonate with you? And so it was giving us a great opportunity. I mean, we've got lots of channels of communication within 47 as well. We use lots of different tools to communicate, to try and socialize together, and to, everybody uses Slack now, but that's just one of the tools. And within Slack, we've got lots of different channels as well. So it's all very friendly. It's all trying to keep those levels, in line. But if I'm thinking about sort of the burnout piece too, it's really wise to keep asking your people, how are they feeling, and how are they connecting with each other, getting the right tools in place for them too. And if the pandemic has taught us anything, I think personally it's taught us that as businesses, we are far more attuned now, to mental health, to well-being, to all of those things that were there. They were always there, but we were kind of just getting on with the day job. We weren't really thinking about how people were feeling. So I think that's something that I think most companies now, it's at the top of their agenda, whereas before it was kind of middle, maybe, it was tinkering on, should we spend any money on it or not? But, now people are investing their own time and energy into it.
Yeah.
We had a similar thing at Devoda. I mean, we've got, as you said, all that kind of lovely trust within the people, and they have complete autonomy over their own jobs. We also did, yoga, art classes, anything you can think of to kind of get a sense of community going. But what we found works the most is having heart-to-heart and face-to-face conversations, especially coming from the leadership team. To allow people to feel like if you need a day off for mental health, you can have one. Our CEO has taken one publicly, and talked very candidly about his own mental health. And it's been really, even just seeing that kind of in the open, you go, oh, it's okay for me as well. So I think definitely coming from that leadership and trickling down, allowing you to feel listened to as a person that works at a company, been good.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a good idea to make it very clear that presenteeism is like a terrible, terrible disease, and you have the freedom to manage your own time, whatever way works best. And at the start of the pandemic, I mean, our CEO just sent round an email to say, look, I'm taking an hour or two out every lunchtime to go for a run or a big swim, or, just something to beat down the stress. And I strongly recommend that everybody else in the company do the same thing. And, it's things like that have a positive benefit. But like a lot of people typical here. I mean, I in other jobs, I worked from home for years at a time, and I got used to the fact that, you know, when the office is only 10 feet away, it's terrifyingly seductive, where you just turn around to the kids and say, I'm just checking an email, you know, and they don't see you for 3 hours, you know. So I managed to learn how to avoid that in a previous life, and it was very fortunate that I'd done that already. It was a huge help. So.
It's the lunch times, I think, for me, where working in office, you'd see people sitting and eating their lunch at their desk. And now we have a solid hour where we have lunch. We also encourage people to join our stand-up, walking outside, doesn't matter. You can join sitting down at your desk. But that's been a real interesting to see people out in the open, joining a meeting. It's lovely.
It's quite funny, actually, because we have a cantina on a Friday, but in the UK it's 5 o'clock. Whereas, what do they always say about having a glass of wine? It's 5 p.m. somewhere. But you know, having a coffee in the States is the same time as having a glass of wine or a beer on a Friday evening. So I suppose it's excusable somewhere along the line. But you know, it is trying about to get those connections, isn't it? And to make sure that even though we're all remote, that we all understand and get to know each other really well. And that's how we work best, collaboratively.
Cool. So I think this we all were missing the social aspect of work, the random chat with the friends or colleagues. I think that's I personally switched company during the lockdown and met my colleagues like many months after. And apart from the height of the people that you never can imagine, can really understand on a meet or a Zoom call, it's just like the random chat, to learn more about the people. That's really missing especially in a very international city like London. Having people from all around the world is really great to learn stories, chat about this different stuff. Everyone were doing Zoom quiz and stuff like this. But if we keep on going in a hybrid, and there will be people constantly remote, people like in different continents, how can we still keep in this social aspect of the work? That's outside just the meeting and stuff like this, in a more meaningful and kind of normal way.
So, if I may, we have this thing at JetBrains, which is a random coffee, which I guess many folks may have. And it's a bot that you can install on Slack. It's called Donut or something like that.
Yeah.
And it pairs you up with someone else, and you just randomly talk to someone. But I'm on the fence when people say that, this remote thing is not good to get to know people, and it's not good to it's harder to socialize. I mean, I've been working remotely 21 years, right? I'm not a very outgoing social person, so to speak. I'm not an extrovert. I wouldn't call myself an extrovert. I'm not one that likes to party a lot with people that I don't know, apart from 2 or 3 intimate friends. But I've managed to be able to communicate with folks and get to know people despite being remote. So I think that we've got this mental thing or this artificial barrier in our head that says, oh yeah, if you're not working in an office, it's going to be difficult to socialize. It's going to be difficult to feel part of a company. And I don't think that is the case. I'm not saying it's not more challenging, absolutely. But nowadays, with the tools that we have, it's so much easier, right? Like, I've always encouraged people to have video conferencing calls when you're talking to someone. Now it's ironic that we're pushing this back. We're saying, video conferencing puts a toll and puts a stress on me, and I don't want to constantly people have to see my face. Well, sure, but when you're in an office, people constantly see your face as well. Yeah, the difference is that they may not see your background, but there's even tools for that now. So I'm not much in favor of this push towards, I want to feel psychologically safe and not have this video, because you didn't have this problem when you were in an office, right? And if we're trying to say that we can work the same remotely as we can work in the same office, and now we start with no, but I don't want to have my video. I don't want people to see me all the time. For me, it feels weird. But anyway, going back to the question is like, seeing someone's facial expressions, seeing them really helps establish a connection. And I've always favored this. So I don't think that necessarily that you're remote hinders the social aspect. It might make it a little bit more challenging, but it's possible.
Just to, if I can just reinforce that a little bit, in preparation for this, I was talking to a bunch of our senior developers, and one thing they were very clear on was the amount of code collaboration actually stayed level at worst and probably went up because it was much easier to do like mobbing and pairing, where as a developer, well, you can see I'm in my little pit here. I mean, it's very obvious that I'm in my little pit, but all the developers could be in their developer pit, and then they could have little ad hoc Zoom conferences or meetup or whatever, and they could just all join in and collaborate and stuff. And we shout out to Code with Me, great tool. So I know that they tried that earlier and more extensively than they would have if we'd all been back in the office, and they had great success with it and so on. So the amount of code collaboration that's going on has actually, potentially risen. It hasn't fallen compared to when everybody was in the office.
I think there's a lot in and around too, with that as to your personality preferences as well. So if you were to look at profiling your preferences, if you're an E or an I kind of thing, you're an extrovert or an introvert, you probably tend to quite like that, working on your own in that space and then collaborating at different times, but at your preference rather than other people. So there are the people there that definitely want to get out and touch and feel and communicate and be in the same room as each other, and there are definitely the people that do prefer to collaborate like this. So I think we've got two ends of an organization really, and we're never going to get the same preference all the way through. So it's just an interesting take on it, but yeah, I agree.
We had to really answer that question in terms of distributed team. So even if you did want to be in the same room, it's physically not possible, and nothing we could do could change that. So having to come up with, we did quizzes, we did the other things. Every Thursday did a drinks night or whatever. And what we came to realize is people prefer to do things ad hoc and actually meet up to celebrate something specific, birthday and anniversary, or a special occasion of someone eating a pizza, anything. But it's much better to have an ad hoc situation rather than forced fun.
That could be an issue, definitely. I can add something. So it's interesting for me. I just realized much later on. So for me, again, switching company during the pandemic, I kind of pressed the reset button. I'm an introvert person, but I kind of decided to be more extrovert. And since I was establish very new communication and a different level of communication with all the new guys, I said, okay, I'll say much more about me. And when I think about it, usually I was okay, should I write this on Slack? And thinking about 10,000 times. Okay, I go it. It had been also having a smaller team, which is much easier, much friendly. You can kind of collaborate every time. I'm still not very confident just speaking in the whole hands with 30, 40, 50 people like this. When it's a smaller team, I'm trying to over communicate even random stuff on my day work about my daughter or my vaccination, stuff like this. So it's just to break the ice, let's say, and help someone else to also to share the info and get more in friendly terms. That's just like colleagues. I'm doing my bits. I want to review your code. You're going to review my code, and that's it. So it's the end of the day.
And one way that we did that in Navoda was, or have been doing that throughout our whole history of Navoda, is when someone joins, after the first week or 2 months, sometimes they'll do an intro video presentation, however they want to do it. It's a really good gauge of, they can do it in any style they like. Some people just talk about their professional history. Some people might do a very jokey one, have personal photos or something like that. It's a really good gauge to kind of get that person's personality. And if they want to just work professionally, you know, that you approach them slightly in a more professional manner, and they might have a jokey one and go, oh, we can have a chat anytime. So it's a good gauge of showing who you are without having the opportunity to meet individuals.
Speaking to some of our project managers, one of their biggest worries was that the new people, you know, the new hires and the people new to a project were settling in okay. And they were saying that they had to kind of rein back the paranoia a bit, because they kind of be going, I know you say you're okay, but are you really okay? Are you really sure you're okay? You know, because they'd be comfortable enough if they were in the same room with them, you know, accepting the assurance, but that they were worried that people were just coming out with platitudes on the Zoom call or whatever, so they had to learn to rein in the paranoia.
That's a really interesting thing about the recruitment, and then you know, thinking about when you're recruiting people and then you're actually hiring them, you're onboarding them, and the recruitment really bit hasn't changed that much in ways, because you're still doing that, you know, Google Meet, you're still meeting, have been for the last almost 18 months to 2 years, meeting people sort of online. And, you know, the biggest challenge now is to get the onboarding right. And how does that onboarding look for new people coming into an organization? And the way I tend to always like to think about it is that people experience, you know, so from the minute they apply to you as an organization and their journey then through, you know, the hiring process, and evaluate that at the end of that, and then their onboarding process, evaluate that at the end of that, and then, you know, up until even when they leave you, and you're evaluating that, and you're not always going to get it right, you're not always going to get it perfect, but it's really good to just keep checking in with people. How are you getting on? What are you doing? What are you up to? And it's not that the micromanaging, it's more about that, you know, let us know what's going on, let us know what that was like for you, so that if we need to change it, we can. We're the only ones that have the power to change it, so, you know, let's see what that experience has been like. I think
shared honesty. If you go, it's kind of the first time we've really done this, are we doing okay as well? That kind of back and forth encourages them to be more honest as well.
And we're definitely not going to get it right all the time. We're human. Isn't that human resources? But my husband always says human remains, but I think yeah, that's why we're human.
I think I'm maybe a little bit of an outlier in that, because whenever we started taking all of our teaching remote, we had 2 trainers on every delivery, simply because we wanted to reassure people that, you know, if one network went out or if somebody had a problem, there would be a continuation of teaching and so on. And because there was no commute, I'd be talking to the other trainer for like half an hour to an hour before the delivery started, and half an hour to an hour after the delivery ended. So I don't, you know, I've never got to know people as well as I have over the past 18 months. You know, everybody I've been co-teaching with, you know, I've had hundreds of hours of interaction with them. But we sat down the other day and we realized the last time we had a face-to-face meeting was late November, and it was quite a shock. You know, so yeah, I mean, you can just keep going in a virtual environment.
Yeah, maybe we're actually talking more.
Yeah. Yeah. Potentially, yeah.
We found that definitely. We're talking more up the Voda. Good. I wish I could get some work done in between all the talking.
You've touched a lot of really good points, and I want to get to all of them. So you've got like a collaboration tool, hiring, inclusion and stuff like this. So I think I'll start with the tools, which is more like a technical stuff, and say that what are the tools you're using for day-to-day job, especially for coding, because in the end we are Kotlin London. We want to talk about like coding, what you find very useful, what you think that you try not working, what you think is going to stick, and probably getting even better. Maybe Hadi we can start with it.
Yeah. I mean, we use Slack for communication. We use Space for pretty much a bunch of things between communication, code reviews, issue tracking. For collaborative work, there's a lot of Code with Me now happening, which Garth mentioned earlier. So it's improving every day, which is nice, because the early days you had to have Code with Me and then have a Google Meet open, and now you can kind of integrate everything in the same. Those are the main things, and then of course many projects, like for example Kotlin, continue to operate many aspects of it on GitHub itself. So I wouldn't say there is anything special. Beyond that, we continue to do things that, like we've got our internal newsletter, which is once a month, which gives an update to everybody of things going on. We've got weekly gazettas, which gives updates on what the different teams are doing. But I have found, I don't know if other folks have this challenge, but I've always struggled, and I think a lot of people struggle with the push versus pull of information. And I think that now we're in a situation where we are pushing too much and people start to ignore because there's just too much noise. Like, we're about 2,000 people at JetBrains, and every team may write a blog post, and every team may write an update, and every team may write this, and every team may write that. And even though like a tool like Space allows you to say, okay, well, target these individuals and only these people are going to be reading that, we find quite a bit that people say, I say, oh, were you aware of this, or were you aware of that? No, when did that come out? Well, we mentioned it in the blog post. Yeah, I've got a backlog of 50 blog posts that I haven't read yet, right? Or I've got a backlog of 30 messages that I haven't read yet. And that's becoming an ever increasing issue, independently of the pandemic, I believe. So there is a thing, I think, that is kind of like over communication, if you call it that way.
I think for us, similar to you, Hadi, we're probably using lots of the same tools. I think that there are some tools that we're probably using collaboratively, like ClickUp, where it's a project management tool, so it's easy to track and trace all those projects. In back to your comment about, are we over communicating and is there a backlog on things? I mean, it's just shifted really from email, hasn't it? It's now shifted from email to WhatsApp and to Slack. So basically it's always there, and there's always been that backlog, and people are quite habitually people are quite easy to just say, oh, I messaged you on Slack about it, or I sent you an email about it. And so that's always going to be a challenge, I think, no matter how you work or what tools you use. And I think it's always trying to get the best out of the tools that you use. But I think another tool that we have, which really helps us understand people, is 15.5, and that's sort of like an engagement tool. So that gives us that understanding as to what people are doing sort of every week if they want to check in. And it gives us the opportunity to go back to our teams and say to them, so you mentioned that, what the issues there. So we're kind of on it rather than off it, I think, at 47. So, and we're a smaller company, so it's easier for us to be able to do that, I think.
I think also the importance of what you mentioned is, that barrage of information that's everywhere and you don't know which one to look at. Being quite strict with, we're obviously a much smaller company, but being quite strict with where you put that communication. For instance, I don't think hardly anyone that works in Devoda has used an email for months, years, I'm not sure. So anytime anything official documentation, they know that it will come through their email, and it's that kind of much more official. However, any other less important communication will go through Slack and in the right channel, So, but yeah, we've had discussions about having a videoing our meetings and doing a summary of it at the end, sending out a newsletter. Which kind of format of media do we need to do to make sure that people are understanding? But realistically, people will pay attention when it affects them and when it interests them most of the time. And so it's about, finding the right channel and making sure it's reaching the right people. It's a full-time job in itself.
Absolutely. No, our development teams that they were already using, it was Bitbucket, Slack, and Confluence. But I think what happened was they started using them an awful lot better because, if you're in the office, you can just shout, hey, Dave, will you please approve that PR for goodness sake now, whereas what they started doing was writing little plugins and so on. So people would get alerts and say, this has just been submitted and can you approve this and so on, so that everything was asynchronous, and you could get to it whenever you needed to and so on. But you were getting reminders that were things that needed done, And then on the training side of the business, Space was an absolute revelation, because we'd been to Kotlin Conf and we'd seen the beta of Space, and whenever we decided that all of our training was going remote, it was a case of we're having that, So we got permission to set up a Space instance for each delivery that we do, and that just gives us one place for all the chat channels, all the setup guides, all the documentation, all the Git repos, So from a remote delivery perspective, it was an absolute lifesaver.
So I have a follow-up question, if you don't mind, Enzo, to everyone here.
Yeah, go on. Absolutely.
I grew up with email. In fact, a colleague of mine just told me that the first email went out in 1971, 50 years ago, right? I used to give talks back in the old days when you could travel. And one time someone said to me, you talk about not having interruptions, etc. How do you deal with someone coming up to your desk while you're in the zone programming and trying to do something, right? And I said, well, I solved that problem because I work from home. So nobody really comes to my desk, right? And yet we feel like what I'm trying to get to is that I think that tools like Slack, even Space, are pushing us in the wrong direction. I think that they've given us a sense of false urgency. I think they've given us a sense that we do not value other people's time or their interruptions. And the tools are trying to solve the problem in the wrong way, right? So, Slack, for instance, introduces snoozing. So you send me a message, I'm busy at that moment, but I've got this damn stupid thing flickering next to me. So I'm going to look to see what it is. Now the message is read. Now I've got to set a reminder for myself and magically in that instant figure out when exactly do I want to be reminded of that, taking into account the queue of other reminders that I have, right? And now Slack says, okay, well, I'll put the burden on the sender. So the sender's like, oh, okay, I'll schedule this to send it to you in 3 days. Yes, it's called an email. Oh, damn it, send the damn email. And I just feel like it's so wrong. I've come to dislike Slack and any chat application so much. And every time I talk about it, people are like, well, put it on non-available. Put your time, say that you're not available. I'm like, but that is sending the completely wrong message as well, right?
Yeah.
So I have a practice that I apply myself. I try very hard. Sometimes it slips, which is if I don't need an immediate response from someone, if it's something that can wait, I will not ping them on Slack. I will send them an email. There are some people that come to me and say, hey, why didn't you just ping me on Slack? You can't win, right? But so I want to know what you folks think about that, if you don't mind, Enzo.
No, absolutely. It's a very good point.
We could probably do a whole talk on Slack, right? My view is probably a bit like you, Hadi. I always used email. Email was almost like I'd schedule my emails for that was my work. That was my day's work. People would, and I'd be replying emails all day long and I'd be making sure that's how it worked. But for me, actually, I quite like Slack because it reminds me of all the things that I should have done and I should be doing them now. So I love it when people say to me, hey, have you done that? Oh, God, yeah. So in a way, I think, again, it goes back to my initial thing about our preferences to working, really. And, what's our profile in that preference to working? And if other people understand it and we know it as an organization, it's much easier then, in ways for us to communicate as well with each other when it's appropriate, when it's not, you know. And I was also of the era that when people started going into meetings with their laptops open and we're having a meeting, you know, and it was always, you know, I was considering it, is it not more respectful to close your laptop, have the meeting, and then carry on about your work, rather than, and it goes down to respect as well, you know, and as an organization, what the organization feels is the right things to do. So it's quite interesting, because I agree, and I so disagree with you in a different sense as far as that's concerned, but it's, again, my preference to working.
The personal preference thing is very, very important. We introduced, obviously we work on a number of different projects, each team at Navoda, and so each team, when a new project starts, will introduce their own preferences and say, if you want to get hold of me, the best way is to Slack or email or whatever. Bearing in mind, not everyone will keep up with everyone's personal preferences, so the straight email might go somewhere, but setting up those boundaries at the beginning and telling people kind of what to expect. You won't get an immediate response from me usually, or I only answer my emails after 4 p.m. really does kind of set the tone for how to communicate with each other. I mean, I'd be happy if no one sent me another email for the rest of my life, but we move. It's fun.
Very good.
Yeah, I guess my problem there is, you know, if I set a status message and say, hey, want to reach me, unless it's urgent, send me an email. You know, what is the message that I'm sending across to people? I'm an arrogant little whatever.
I think it's okay to be arrogant.
Don't bother me.
Honestly, I'm currently on holiday, but I very happily put a message on my email away message saying, on my return, will be deleting every email in my inbox, because I get probably 100 a day more. I don't want to go back to an inbox that's 1,000+ emails. And so I've said, if it's really urgent, please do send it again in as nice way as humanly possible. But sure, I'm probably thinking that's coming across as arrogant, but protecting your own kind of time and mental health and not trying to go through 800 messages about newsletters that I've signed up to.
I dealt with that problem by basically just catching up with email during vacation. So
That is not a good idea. Yeah.
I'm really busy, actually, just going to the beach. Sort of taking up a lot of my time, actually.
I wonder too, though, if that's something that pandemic has taught us, like to be very open and honest about things, you know. And so, you know, I can't do that right now. Whenever would you have said that years ago? You'd have probably said, okay, well, I won't tell my boss I can't do it now. I'll just try and fit it in later. And that was historically making us work longer and later, probably. But in ways now, I think we're far more open to addressing things and addressing, you know, daily issues, and actually what's going on in my life isn't okay at this moment. You know, I'll come back to you in a while. And I don't think it's arrogance. I really don't. I think setting the tone, as you know, as Eddie has said, is right. It's open, it's transparent, and you know, you're in fact you're communicating better than you would be if you just didn't answer them, or it's an interference and I don't need it. So being honest, I think, is a great thing.
Yeah. There's definitely some interesting excuses people have come up with. You know, one of mine is, look, I have to go for a couple of minutes. The cat is attacking the Amazon delivery man, you know. So it's definitely it's a new reality. But I think I have the advantage because people know that I'm running workshops, you know, most of the time. So before people send me a message, they know to look at the training calendar and go, okay, you know. So I either reply to things within 30 seconds or 4 days, you know, depending on what's going on. And I've just trained people to get used to that. But I have to admit, I do embrace the evil. You know, I really enjoy just diving in for 3 or 4 hours and just, you know, you get Slack in one window, Twitter in the other window, and so on. And, you know, you're just having 4 or 5 simultaneous conversations, and it's great fun, you know. But again, that's personal preference.
Right, I'm conscious about the time, and since we have a couple of questions, I would like to answer the question. And we have some more time, I can go on with the conversation. So the first question is from Hadi, a friend of ours, the meetup. So I have a teammate who has joined during lockdown. For him, all the teammates are new, which is kind of common especially in the last couple of years. He is not able to establish a good connect with anyone. What tips can I give him? Who wants to answer first?
For me, I know I'm going against what I said earlier in this chat, but doing a quiz really, really helped. But like a personal quiz about everyone that works on the team and finding out a really ridiculous facts about them. For instance, I worked at the company for 2 years before I found out that one of my colleagues was 6'11", which was a huge surprise. So little facts like that, and it doesn't have to be an hour long, literally a little fun fact quiz. And you will automatically get an opener to be able to talk to a teammate going, "Are you really 6'11"? You must have very big shoes." That's a good icebreaker.
Yeah, I'd agree. Giving some good icebreakers before people join. I mean, it's something we're looking at now, in the sense of we want to have a monthly kind of new joiner. People come and meet in a cantina. So what are the questions that we could ask people prior to that, so that they don't feel, oh, I'm new, I don't really want to do this, that kind of feeling. So it's also about us reaching out to them, making sure they're feeling welcome. It's not just about how they establish good connections, it's what we can do, as a team to really involve them and really bring them on board, because it is quite daunting, and especially being remote, it's even more daunting.
That was my first thought, that it's not, that a new person's responsibility to reach out to the team. It's the team's responsibility to reach out to them, But I do find that in any good company, there are any number of opportunities to make an idiot of yourself, So I would say volunteer for as many of those as you possibly can, So what we had like the Friday quiz, and I remember volunteering for that and doing it on 80s TV shows, and that making me realize just how old I am compared to the average age of one of our developers, So yeah, exploit the opportunities for making an idiot of yourself.
Another question about recruitment. So what are the most common working schemes that currently companies now offering engineers? Do many allow full-time remote work? That's more like HR.
I mean, at Novoda, we have been offering fully remote work since the beginning of time. So that's not new for the pandemic, but we have been looking about how we are hiring in different countries and how to make that possible. Completely worldwide possibility. But otherwise, in terms of Europe and so far, fully remote, and happy to continue.
I think for us too, I mean, certainly the UK, we're pretty much remote. In Spain, we have a fully open and working office in Cadiz, in San Fernando. And people are getting that hybrid opportunity as well, where they can work so many days from the office and work from home for so many days as well. So there are opportunities, I think. And again, it goes back, originally to the whole thing about the laws and what's happening in your country at this moment in time. What is the freedom and flexibility, and what is the risk of you going into an office or staying working remotely? So I think there are different challenges based on what country you're in and where you are even located within that country.
I have a follow-up question, because everyone wants to go fully remote, but most of the people are still have an issue to understand different countries, different rules. If you have set up a company in every country, you have like remote working, where you have different type of contracts. So how can we solve this puzzle if you want to enable our employees to work from everywhere, at least in Europe or all over the world? So how can we fully become international and fully remote if we're still struggling with the contracts and stuff like this? Because sometimes it's just like people just want to go back to their home country for a month and work from that for a month. Some companies are not allowing that because of the issue regulations. So how can you solve this puzzle?
So sorry, if I could answer again on that, then I think having a really good hybrid sort of / remote working policy in place is really going to help you. I think what some employees don't really understand is working remotely is remote. But if you're on a remote contract within a given country, it's very difficult to just take off and go to another country and work. And that's for many reasons. It's for tax reasons, it's for insurance purposes, it's for a whole host of different things. And so by having a really good policy, and it's something at 47 we're thinking, we're working on at this moment, because we want people to be careful. We want people to have that freedom and flexibility to working, but we also want to make sure that we're having our duty of care, we're being responsible in what we're doing, but we're also trying to meet certain restrictions that we have in the different locations where we operate. So it's really important, I think, for both an employer and an employee perspective, that you have something that's really solid and firm behind you that can back you up, which can enable your employees to work flexibly, but with that security in place as well. So that would be my point of view for it.
Yeah, I think that a lot of folks that sometimes judge a company by whether they allow remote work or not, especially lately, it's kind of, if this company doesn't allow remote work, they're evil and they're horrible and they're not nice, seem to forget all of the other burdens that come with remote work, right? Contracts, social securities, tax regulations. Can you hire a person? And a lot of times the folks are like, oh, I mean, what's the problem? Like, we're even saving costs for you because you're remote, so you don't need an office, you don't need office desk. Actually, no. Actually, in many cases, the cost of being remote can significantly be higher, right? Because of all of the regulations and things that are involved in that. And I think that oftentimes we lose sight of this, and we just, say, oh, well, they're horrible. They don't allow remote work.
I mean, even Brexit has posed so many new challenges and new issues for us as well, in that working remotely, and what can that look like for people. But I agree, there's an awful lot of challenges for both the company and the employee perspective, but I think from a company perspective, there needs to be good guidelines around it.
If it's going to be the future of work worldwide, and it's going to have to change, and governments are going to have to step up a little bit, I think. So I think it's definitely what companies can do, and then what actual countries are doing to help their workers.
Yeah, and I'm actually quite disappointed in Europe here. I was about 4 months ago, I was speaking to someone from the EU Commission. They were investigating some aspects of software and that, and they were talking to me, and they're like, we want to pour money into this. I said, instead of pouring money into this, what you should do is make the regulations a little bit more flexible. Make the sales tax a little bit more flexible for people that want to sell software, individuals that don't have to go through this, taxamo companies that make sure that each tax is being paid correctly for sales in each country and logged. Make these things more flexible. Make EU cross-border workforce more flexible. These are the things that you should be working on, right? Not, oh, let's just pour money and pat ourselves on the back. So yeah, they really need to. I mean, even within Europe, it's ridiculous how difficult it is sometimes to hire folks. Yeah. I'm not even talking about Brexit.
I was going to say, I'm speaking as a resident of Northern Ireland, I will not start talking about Brexit because I will never stop. So
it took an hour for the word to come up.
My fault. I was actually thinking of the data protection and the whole data issue of people working remotely as well, especially when you've got clients on board, and that sensitive information. And so, yeah, it just makes life quite difficult. But, being aware of it all really helps us, I think.
Good. It just confirmed my doubts. I'm not involved in that regulation part of tax, but I'm aware of it, unfortunately. And also from the European point of view, definitely they should move and start thinking about if we have a kind of a global market in terms of European Union where people can freely move, why it should be the other way around, where it's the work that should move in the different countries. But yeah, we'll see. Maybe one day. I have a question specifically for Hadi, but I think that's everyone can else answer it. So about developers living in different time zone and the overlapping working hours and how which will be the optimal work in general. If you have any tips about it, like different time zone.
I mean, I don't know. I don't have any data to back this up. But if we take your average 8-hour a day, right? In those 8 hours a day, probably 5 hours of those are really truly like productive. So I would say that if you have 3-4 hour overlap, I think that's more than enough. And in those 3-4 hours, you can have your meetings, ask your questions and stuff like that. We have, I mean, on the developer advocacy team, we have people that are in multiple time zones. So for example, Trisha, on the job advocacy team, there's Trisha, there is Mala that's in India, Trisha is in Spain, Mala is in India, Dalia is in the US, and we have Helen that's in London, right? So it's very, very difficult at times because of India and the US for them to find an hour or two to overlap, to sync, right? So that does prove a little bit challenging. But generally, I mean, I think that if you have 2-3 hours, in my opinion, that's enough. But I don't know what others think.
I mean, I think certainly for us, we try to build in that time at the end of the day or the beginning of the day, depending on time zones. And I think very similar to you, Hadi, with people in the States, with people in the US, we actually have had somebody in Malaysia. So trying to meet all of those time zones, with Europe as well being one of the biggest offices we have is in Spain. So trying to meet all those time zones, we just have a bit of a commitment, I think, and that's that you will try and check in at some time. And in another sense, I think that's very much what flexible working is really all about. You know, it's about making sure that, you know, those 8 hours or whatever it is you're tied to a day, that you try to be as flexible with those 8 hours as you can. But flexibility always comes on a two-way path, you know, so a company can be flexible with you, but you also have to try to be as flexible as you can with the company if it suits. So it's about, I think it's about a bit of give and take in both areas.
We've moved all of our all hands meetings to the middle of the day, so that, for instance, we have that 3-hour overlap, and we've built the 3-hour overlap into our recruitment strategy for remote hiring. So we can hire from any country as long as there's a minimum of 3-hour overlap.
Yep, we do something similar. Yeah.
I tell you what's more problematic is lunch.
Yeah,
we eat lunch at like 3:30 here in Spain, and you know, and everyone's scheduling meetings for me at 3:30, and I'm like, it's lunch. And they're like, lunch was at 12.
So I would like to ask you a question. I think this is right now. I see a lot of companies trying to hire mid to senior developers for many reasons, but also because it's much easier to onboard them remotely or in the hybrid stuff. But there will be a time that we have to think about like hiring more junior engineers because the senior developer will be over. There will be no more senior developer to hire or to snitch from other company. And so the question is, how do you hire junior engineer? Do you have any tips on how to hire? And how in general, like diversity and inclusion can be optimized for remote working?
I mean, it's been hot on the agenda at the moment, for sure. We've just gone through the onboarding of an intern for the summer, which was really interesting. So not a junior developer, but certainly a similar onboarding experience, I would suggest. And taking time to understand what needs they have and the support that we would need to provide. They had a buddy that would stay with them the entire time and was available for any questions, no stupid questions, silly questions, clever questions, all of them. And we've actually discussed in the future when we're hiring junior developers is putting together a workshop and flying everyone in for a week, for however long we think we need, so that you get not only FaceTime, but also get to meet the colleagues that you're working with, and you get a bit of, I don't know, face-to-face time and support, the people you are working with a little bit better.
Yeah, yep. I mean, we certainly get lots of applications for people who have little experience in Scala or Kotlin. And, whilst we have a training bench, we are a small company, and it's very difficult to try and accommodate everybody's needs. We meet some fantastic people in that interview process, and we know that our bench is small. So a lot of our engineering directors who are really, really great here, what they'll do is they'll signpost people, and they'll tell them, perhaps you could be looking at this and you could be looking at that. And, something that we always want to do is keep those connections with people. So it's very much about, telling them about the academy. The academy is there, the 47 Degrees Academy, that is. And you can have a look at that. You can have a look at some of the courses on there, but also signposting them to some of the learning that they can do themselves in the meantime. But also having a positive conversation with them and saying, look, we can't fit you onto the bench at the moment, but please do come back, or, we'll make a note to come back to you, because it's throughout the pandemic, it's the young people that have been affected, quite severely here. And if we're looking at, D&I, it's that group that, has missed out. So what is it that we can do, I think? And we do have constraints because we're a small organization, but, as I say, we meet some really fantastic junior developers, and it would just be great to give everybody a job, but basically we can't. So, we just don't have the capacity to develop them, but, there are routes for that.
I think a lot of it comes back to what Hadi was saying before, that if I could use the buzzword, and I'm really sad, I thought somebody else would be the first to use this buzzword, but I'll use it. The remote working has been a forcing function. That's what all the cool kids seem to be saying these days, But it's widened, employers' perspective on what is and isn't possible, and how wide a geographical area they can recruit from, and what new kinds of working patterns they can support, and all this kind of thing. And I think that has to be good in the long run. And like you were saying, as an educator, I think what we are seeing is that it's forced companies to be a lot more serious about how they do the onboarding, how they do the training, how they do the mentorship and the buddying and so on. And we see a lot of companies coming to us now, and that they're taking their graduate training a lot more seriously than they would have before. They want things a lot more formalized, a lot more tailored, and so on. And they're just thinking a lot more about how they're approaching it, the recruitment, the onboarding, the whole thing. And I think that can only be good in the long run.
Yeah, some of the things we're also doing is we're working with some of the local universities as well, where we have an office space. So, I mean, that's something that's going to be of value as well. And what can we look at the training for the future? What would that look like? And the people coming on board. But it is a challenge being a sort of a smaller company than some of the bigger ones out there, in the sense of their capacity for training. But yeah, it's really on our agenda.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
So I'm conscious about the time, so I would just like to close it. So the final question will be, so are we entering a new world of work? There will be the remote, hybrid, and whatever work. So is the 5 days to office really finished for good?
Not for certainly not for every industry. I think it depends on your culture, and it depends on the industry you work in. I don't think some people are quite ready for it yet, and that's absolutely fine. And I think some people have been ready for a really long time. I'm excited for a future where we embrace hybrid across a lot of different industries and allow people flexibility, but also provide support for people in those kind of jobs and hybrid situations.
I mean, certainly, I've worked in an office for a long time, and I wouldn't like to see the end of it. So I do believe it's hybrid, definitely. And I think too, it's about that humanistic approach.
Nice. Hadi, you've done like for a long time. So you've seen it coming. So what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I don't think so. I think that we're going to go back to offices, and I think that there's people desperate that want to go back to offices. So I don't think so. I mean, the other day I saw a tweet about how someone was saying that the pandemic has disrupted all the rich folks and made them realize that remote work is possible, which I don't even know how that even makes sense. But anyway, but no, I don't think the pandemic has disrupted anything. I think it's made us realize that for certain industries, remote work is possible. For many others, it isn't. Like, we sit in the comfort of our own houses, right? And do our work and forget that actually we are very lucky that there's a billion people out there that have to go every day and risk their lives, and remote work for them is not possible. So I think we're going to go back to normal.
This is really true. Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, a few months into the pandemic, I was talking to one of my former mentors, the teacher who taught me how to teach, and his comment is, "You're never going to be leaving the house ever again," because his perspective was that all education is going to be remote and virtual from now on. I don't actually believe him. I think I'm more in Hadi's camp. I'm a little bit more cynical about the whole thing, but I think in IT at least there will be some hybrid model going forwards, because the market is so competitive for developers at the moment, and developers have had a taste of freedom, So I think every company will have to offer at least some form of hybrid model going forwards, just talking about our industry. But yeah, but being from Ireland, I know lots of people in tourism and so on, and they've obviously had a hideous, horrible time, and we always have to respect just how lucky we are, and we're one of the few industries that was actually able to weather the storm without too much damage, relatively speaking.
I think it even grew.
Yeah.
Seeing how hard lately it is to hire people, I'd say we've grown quite a bit.
Yeah.
And productivity hasn't dipped either. So, the working remotely has worked, but it's that connection I think people really need and want. And, I think I agree with Hadi. I don't think the office is over yet. I think there will be a lot of people, and it will be that we'll probably remain opening and operating, but there will always be that hybrid approach now. I think people have shown they can work from home. And comfortably to a certain degree. I mean, we didn't check people, did we? We said, oh, you can work from home, but we never looked at their environments. We never checked to see really in the initial stages, were they doing okay? Were they able to work from their bedroom? Were they in a shared flat? Were they wherever they were working? Yeah. It wasn't of concern to us. To keep operating was of concern, and now we're far more aware of that.
I mean, we've recently just we're working. It's going to open soon, a 10-story building in Amsterdam for our folks, right? And that is based on people's demand, right? We know that people want to go back to the offices, and yet no one's forcing them. I mean, we clearly said our policy at JetBrains is remote work. If you enjoy it, if your team is happy, if you can make it work, you can stay at home. There's no need for you to come back to the office. And yet people are itching to go back to the office. I don't know if it's for you don't have to cook your own food thing or what.
I was actually, I was discussing this with some of our junior developers and said, yeah, there's definitely an age factor here, because you all have hopes and dreams and you want to go out into the world and achieve things. And I just want a mug of Earl Grey and NCIS at the end of the day. And then I'm perfectly happy, So.
We've definitely had the opposite problem, where we've opened an interim office, which people are welcome to come to, and it's been very, very badly attended. People just don't want to come in, and the only reason they do is to see people. The commute alone is enough to put people off. So,
yeah, I hate commutes.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's more manageable if you do it only once a week. Even if it goes badly, and with the London Tube it can go badly quite often, especially right now. But you go back home and say, "Oh, just for today," and that's it. But at least you can enjoy all the podcasts that you missed during the lockdown. They're good and bad for everything.
Yeah.
So thanks so much. the discussion could have gone for a long time, but we have to stop it here. Otherwise, it's like too much for the audience. I just have to do the raffle. So quickly, if we can get the prices and get the raffle, yeah. We have like we can get the draw going on. It takes some time.
Is that just two names?
Could be. So we have Shervin. Yeah, congratulations. And I think the second one, yes, is just Daniele. So I think we can go with that. So both Daniele and Shervin, congratulations. Because I think that Hadi didn't put the hashtag. So there's the limitation of the technology. It's a great tool, but if you don't put the hashtag, you can get selected. So the question didn't get selected. So the winners are Daniele and Shervin. Please send us an email based on what the price you want. Just remember, if you can either have the JetBrains license or an yearly subscription to Moshi. To just send us an email, and we're happy to give you the prices you want. Right. Thanks so much to Garth, Carmel, Edie, and Hadi for being with us. It's been a pleasure to host the stuff. It was the first time I was doing the host of the panelists. I was really nervous. I think everything went good. I think that's it. To the everyone who stayed with us to the end, thanks so much. Hope you enjoyed it. We're going back probably in October. We're still trying to really understand if we're going to having an in-person event or still like online, but we're trying to manage to both of them. I would like to thank my co-organizer, Guillermo, who was doing all the production, and Pablo and Amar, who basically organized all the everything around it, our panelists. Thanks. From me, stay safe and see you next time. Bye.
Brilliant.
Bye-bye.